The Galactic Mercantile Guild prided itself on order, predictability, and above all, profit. A sprawling bureaucracy that spanned 1,000 star systems, the Guild was a behemoth of commerce, its influence woven into the very fabric of interstellar trade. Its members, a diverse collection of species, but predominantly the meticulously organized and regulation-obsessed Volrites, saw the galaxy as a vast ledger and sentient species as assets or liabilities. Humans, relatively new to the galactic scene, were firmly in the asset column, specifically, as a source of remarkably cheap labor and an eager market for last-cycle consumer goods. Senior Adjudicator Kalak of the Volrites, a being whose carapace was naturally segmented into neat, easily quantifiable sections, reviewed the quarterly reports from human interfacing sectors. Productivity in the human colonies remains within acceptable parameters, he chirped, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Their adherence to Guild Labor Mandate 7, subsection Gamma 12, concerning voluntary overtime quotas, is exemplary. Minor localized protests regarding resource allocation on Praxis IV, but easily placated with a revised nutrient-paced distribution schedule. They are pliable. This was the prevailing Guild view. Humans were seen as fundamentally docile workers. Their societal structures, with their myriad laws and regulations, were viewed by the Guild not as a sign of sophistication, but as an exploitable pathway. The Guild's own legal framework was a labyrinth of clauses, subclauses, and riders designed to favor the Guild, and humans, for the most part, seemed to navigate this maze with a sigh and a shrug, signing contracts that would make a Draknar space pirate blush. Human strikes were rare, usually short-lived, and easily broken by threatening to invoke obscure contractual penalties for work stoppage, affecting interstellar commerce flow. The Guild had been slowly tightening its grip on human colonies for decades. Predatory loan agreements for terraforming equipment, exclusive supply contracts for vital atmospheric components at inflated prices, and resource extraction quotas that bordered on the impossible. Humanity grumbled. They filed complaints that vanished into the Guild's Byzantine administrative vortex. They endured. The Guild saw this as a sign of their inherent passivity, their inability to grasp the true levers of galactic power. The catalyst came with the Xylithium crisis. Xylithium was a rare crystalline element crucial for faster-than-light drive cores. Trace deposits had been found in the asteroid belt of the Sol system, humanity's home, and more significantly, on several of their older colonies. Due to a peculiar quirk of human biology, a high tolerance for certain low-level radiation emitted during the Xylithium refining process, humans could handle the final, most delicate stages of purification more safely and efficiently than any known automated system or other species. For years, this had been a niche, if profitable, human enterprise. Then, a major Xylithium deposit, controlled by the Zintari Star Collective, was unexpectedly exhausted. Suddenly, human-refined Xylithium became critically important to the entire Guild's interstellar shipping network. The Guild, sensing opportunity, moved swiftly. They presented the United Human Colonies with a new emergency resource allocation and processing contract, Xylithium, revised. The terms were, even by Guild standards, breathtakingly oppressive. A 90% Guild levy on all refined Xylithium, fixed processing prices far below market value, and mandatory output increases that would require human refineries to operate at dangerous, unsustainable levels. Failure to comply would trigger Universal Trade Sanction Protocol Omega 9, effectively cutting humanity off from all galactic trade. The Guild negotiators, led by the smug Volrite, Subdirector Pinar, expected some token resistance, perhaps a plea for slightly better terms, before the humans inevitably signed. After all, what choice did they have? The human representatives, led by a surprisingly calm woman named Alara Vance, a former union lawyer who now served as a trade liaison, listened patiently. They asked a few clarifying questions about specific subclauses. Pinar and his team answered with condescending precision, pointing to the unbreakable legality of the Guild's position. Then Vance simply said, "We will need to consult with our member colonies." We will give you our answer within one standard week. Pinar almost laughed. A week to accept the inevitable. Very well, Liaison Vance. But understand the Guild's need is urgent. The galactic economy depends on this. Back on Earth and across the human colonies, the Guild's ultimatum was met not with panic, but with a strange, quiet hum of activity. For years, human lawyers, economists, union organizers, and even disgruntled accountants working within Guild-affiliated companies had been patiently observing. They'd studied Guild regulations, noted their internal contradictions, mapped their procedural choke points. They'd seen how the Guild used its own bureaucracy as a weapon. They'd taken notes. Lots of notes. When Alara Vance reconvened with the Guild delegation precisely 1 week later, she didn't bring a counteroffer. She brought a data slate. Subdirector Pinar, Vance said, her voice even and devoid of emotion. After careful consideration of Guild contract ERAPZ revised, and in accordance with Guild Interspecies Commerce Code, Article 47, Paragraph B, Subparagraph 3, Sapient Species Right to Due Diligence Review, we have identified 7,438 points requiring further clarification before we can proceed to ratification. Pinar's mandibles twitched. 7,000 clarifications, preposterous. This is a standard resource allocation contract. Nevertheless, Vance continued, unfazed, these points, ranging from ambiguities in terminology as defined in Guild Lexicon Appendix H, Volume 17, to potential conflicts with previously ratified local planetary edicts permissible under Guild Fair Trade Proviso 22.4, require official written response from the relevant Guild subdepartments. We have, of course, taken the liberty of preparing the initial inquiry forms for each point, all 7,438 of them, properly triplicated as per Guild Administrative Procedure Manual, Section Delta 9. They are being uploaded to your official Guild inquisitorial portal now. On Pinar's console, a notification pinged, then another, and another. A torrent of incoming data, each a meticulously crafted, legally sound inquiry, citing Guild law back at itself. This is an obstructionist tactic, Pinar sputtered, his carapace flushing a dull, angry purple. Not at all, Subdirector, Vance replied smoothly. We are merely exercising our contractual right to full clarity. We take our obligations to the Guild and to the letter of its laws very seriously. For instance, Inquiry number 1 concerns the definition of processed ton as it relates to zilithium purity. Guild Standard 34B specifies a 99.87% purity, but Addendum 12 to the current contract implies a 99.91% standard for emergency resources. Which definition prevails? And does the latter require recalibration of our entire refining infrastructure, for which Guild Compensation Schedule, Form 88C, would need to be invoked prior to commencement? The Guild's bureaucratic heart, usually so efficient at processing profits, began to seize. The zilithium refineries across human space didn't stop. Oh no, that would be a breach of contract. Instead, they slowed. Dramatically. Every single step of the refining process was now preceded by a formal request for clarification on some minute aspect of Guild safety regulations, environmental impact statements, as per Guild Green Initiative Mandate 702, or equipment calibration standards, cross-referencing 3 different Guild technical manuals, 2 of which were out of date, but still legally binding. Human cargo ships carrying raw zilithium ore to refineries began filing optimal route variance requests, citing obscure Guild stellar cartography bulletins that suggested slightly longer, but technically safer, according to Guild Guideline 445 Alpha, routes. This added days to transport times. At Guild customs checkpoints, human ships presented manifests that were so detailed, so exhaustively cross-referenced with every conceivable Guild import-export regulation that they took hours for Guild officials to even begin to process. Every I was dotted, every T crossed, often multiple times, with footnotes referencing other footnotes. The Galactic Mercantile Guild, a titan of commerce, found itself drowning in its own red tape, wielded with a terrifying, passive-aggressive precision by a species they had dismissed as simple laborers. This wasn't a strike. It was malicious compliance on an unprecedented, system-wide scale. Humanity wasn't breaking the rules. They were following them with such an obsessive, pedantic fervor that the entire system was grinding to a halt. Subdirector Pinar's office was inundated with frantic communiques from every sector. Zilithium shipments were catastrophically delayed. FTL drive core manufacturers were screaming. Shipping lines were idling. The Guild's own internal administrative departments were collapsing under the weight of tens of thousands of perfectly formulated, utterly trivial, yet legally mandated inquiries from humanity. They are weaponizing our own procedures, Kalak, the senior adjudicator, exclaimed in a crisis meeting, his carapace segments clattering in agitation. Every request is valid under Guild law. Every delay is justified by citing one of our own regulations. We cannot fault their logic, only their intent. The oh shit moment for the Guild leadership came when Alara Vance made her next move. She filed a formal grievance of undue duress and contractual ambiguity against the Guild itself, on behalf of the United Human Colonies, citing over 12,000 instances where conflicting or unclear Guild regulations made it impossible for humanity to fulfill its contractual obligations regarding Zilithium without risking accidental violation of other Guild laws. The grievance, filed with the nominally independent Galactic Trade Adjudication Panel, whose rules of procedure were, naturally, written by the Guild, demanded a full, panel-led review of the entire ERAPZ contract and a temporary stay on its enforcement until all 12,000-plus points of ambiguity were resolved. The estimated timeframe for such a review, given standard panel backlogs: decades. The Guild was checkmated by their own rules. Pinar, humbled and furious, was forced to request an immediate renegotiation with Vance. This time, there was no condescension, just a desperate plea to make the paperwork stop. Vance, still unnervingly calm, replied, "We are, of course, open to discussing a more streamlined contractual arrangement, Subdirector. One that is clear, unambiguous, and mutually beneficial. Perhaps we can start with Zilithium processing prices that reflect fair market value and output quotas that take into account human worker welfare, as vaguely alluded to in Guild Benevolence Charter, Appendix Gamma, Section 2, Paragraph 1. The aftermath was a painful but profound lesson for the Galactic Mercantile Guild. The Zilithium crisis was averted, but only after humanity secured a new contract that was not just fair, but highly favorable. More importantly, the Guild was forced into a massive, galaxy-wide overhaul of its own impenetrable bureaucracy. They had to simplify, clarify, and streamline their own regulations, lest another species learned from humanity's example. A new respect, tinged with a considerable amount of fear, blossomed for humanity across the Guild. They were no longer seen as pliable laborers. They were the quiet ones, the patient observers, the ones who read the fine print and who possessed an almost terrifying capacity for weaponized pedantry. The legend of humanity's bureaucratic war spread. Other exploited species began to cautiously study human legal tactics. The Volrites in particular developed a grudging admiration. They did not use force, Kalak mused to a colleague after the dust had settled. They did not shout or posture. They simply understood the system, better than we did, perhaps. And then they turned it with perfect, cold logic against its creators. It was, in its own horrifying way, beautiful. A new, unwritten rule emerged within the Guild's upper echelons. Never assume a human hasn't read every word of the contract, and never ever give them a reason to weaponize your own rulebook. Their patience is not passivity, it is the sharpening of 1,000 paper cuts. Humanity, the quiet workers, had taught the galaxy that the pen, when wielded with malicious compliance, could be far mightier and infinitely more frustrating than the sword.